Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our fire station here on 6th Street in the city of Harrisburg. Doesn't it look nice? We thought this would be a neat setting for a public meeting. I am very excited to help kick off the public comment phase of this archives project. As some of you may know or may have read, I am the son of an archivist. My father was the Maryland State Archivist for 40 years. I grew up playing on the floor of the Maryland State Archives, going back in the stacks, eventually doing research in the Maryland State Archives. And I recognize and appreciate the value of archives, especially as a means of connecting to our history and culture and our community here in Harrisburg. And one of the things that excites me so much about this project is the new partnership we have between the Harrisburg City Archives and the State Archives, which is going to make a lot of the records that we have in our possession but really don't have the means to make accessible or really care for, finally accessible to researchers for the first time in years. It's a wonderful benefit to the public. It's going to be a great way to get people connected to this archives and involved. If you want to know the history of your home, who owned it before you, what it was like, this area where we are right now, only 100 years ago was pretty much farmland in Harrisburg. We were on the edge of the city, and all the development that you see north of here in Harrisburg is all fairly recent, and the records for that development are going to be available and accessible at the archives. If you want to know more about your great-grandparents and where they came from and what they did and how much they earned and maybe even how they passed away, all that information is available at the State Archives. So it's a great way to connect to our past and our history. It's a wonderful project, and it represents millions and millions of dollars of new investment in Harrisburg, which will hopefully stimulate the type of economic development that we all want to see. But tonight is about you, the public, getting an opportunity to weigh in, to ask questions, to share your thoughts with what you'd like to see for this future archives building. And we've got just a couple speakers to get us started off and to sort of set this in context for all of you. I want to start by introducing Jim Vaughn, who is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, one of our partners in this project. And Jim, I'd like you to take it away.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me say a personal thank you. You're going to make my life a lot easier when I retire, thanks to the agreement between the city and the state, because I have family history in both the city archives and the state archives, and now I only have to go to one place. So thank you. I want to start by letting you all know that PHMC is delighted with the selection of this site for the new Pennsylvania State Archives. We spent a lot of months in site selection, and it's one of the few sites in Harrisburg that meets all of the unique requirements of an archive. I didn't know this till we started this project, but there's a set of national standards for archive buildings, and one of the standards is it has to be a minimum of 5 feet above a 100-year floodplain. There's another standard that says it has to be so many yards from an operating railroad track. It has to be so many yards from an interstate highway. All of that's because of security issues and the issues of we don't want something blowing up and, we don't want an accident to happen that would threaten the records of the state. So location, there's a lot of considerations. Archives are also very special buildings because they require an amazing variety of environmental, security, and technical requirements. Our current building, by the way, was designed in the late 1950s. And for those of you old enough to remember the 1950s, it was designed largely for paper. Today, we need a facility to house paper, digital, film, and a wide variety of media. And it requires the tightest of temperature and humidity controls, security and fire suppression systems that weren't available back in the 1950s. So we've not only outgrown the archive, we've moved beyond its capabilities in the old building. We've been working with architects for the past year to design a facility that will serve the people of Pennsylvania for the next, what do you think, David, 100 years?
At least.
But here's the challenge. It not only needs to be designed to serve the records that we have today and the records we expect in the future and current electronic records, it needs to be designed with enough flexibility that it can serve whatever the electronic media is 50 or 75 years from now. And if you think about the fact that when the old building was designed, none of our current communication mechanisms were in place, it's a real challenge to make sure the building stays that flexible. We want it to be a very green building because archives are energy consumptive and trying to keep their environmental controls in a very narrow range. And we also want it to be a handsome and substantial contribution to the redevelopment of the neighborhood. David Carmichael, who's not bashful about boasting about his archives, thinks that it's an archive, a state archive, is the second most important building in the state. He hasn't told me what he thinks the number one is. I want to say that in planning for the new archives, we looked around the country for somebody who had the kind of experience that we needed. And David Carmichael is one of the few people in the country who's already designed, built, and moved into an archive. And that was in the state of Georgia. And so David joined us last year to lead this project. And there is an amazing chart on his office wall that has plotted out month by month everything that has to be done in order to move 250 million records, what now is about 5 or 6 blocks, without losing any of them. So, David, would you care to say a few words?
Thank you, Jim. I will say, the public meetings in Georgia when we were building that state archives were a little warmer venues than we're feeling here. So, thanks, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to add my thanks. We have a mayor who gets it, obviously. I've known his father for 30, 40 years, I think. So it's great to have somebody who really understands. So the State Archives is the official repository of historical records for the state of Pennsylvania. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in a moment. As Jim said, our current building is this big white 20-story tower that you all are familiar with down near the State Museum. And we are part of the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission that runs the museum and the archives and the State Historic Preservation Office, historic sites all over the state. And in that tall tower that was designed in the 50s, they planned a building that would store paper and microfilm. And after all these years, we're getting very close to filling that building, which isn't too bad. After 300 years, this is all we've collected, all right? That's not too bad. But we got a plan now because we will be full pretty soon. We're planning for something much different than what we have today. And because Jim is the State Historic Preservation Office, we hope to plan something that will be worthy of preservation 50 years from now, 100 years from now, a building that people will look at and say, we need to preserve that building for all time because it is significant, and that's really what we're looking for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're thinking about the building in just a second, but first I want to tell you what we do. You know, my mother, she used to always say, I don't know what you do, but it sure sounds interesting, okay? And a lot of people say, I don't know what an archivist does and what an archives does. So if you compare it to your family, your house, you receive a lot of records at home, right? And you get electric bills and utility bills and things like that. And most of the records you get, you eventually just throw out because you don't need to keep them forever. But you have certain records that you keep for a very, very long time. If you have a deed to a property or a lease, you keep it a long time. If you have birth certificates, you keep them a long time. If you have treasured family photos, you keep those a long time. And the state is the same way. The state government creates a huge number of records, and a very small percentage have to be kept forever because they protect us legally or they tell our history and we treasure them. And so the job of the archives is to identify that small percentage of records, get them from the state agencies, and preserve them forever. And it's a big task. We have what we call Document 1, is the original charter that King Charles II gave to William Penn to establish Pennsylvania as a colony. We have the original document. We have the original 1776 Constitution of Pennsylvania and all the constitutions that have followed. We have the document where we ratified the US Constitution, the thing that made us a state. Many of these documents. One of the greatest documents, we have all of the acts of the Assembly, the legislature, that they have passed, including the 1790 Act for the gradual abolition of slavery. It was the first legislative attempt in the country to abolish slavery. So we have wonderful, wonderful records. But they're not all these big, heavy-hitting legal records and such. They're also, we have probably 1 million photographs and maps in the archives. Photographs of this community, photographs from all over the state, postcards, tens of thousands of postcards that show the history of Pennsylvania. Lots of records that tell your story and my story. And I hope you have time when we're done here to look at these panels, because we talk about some of those documents and how they tell our story, not just the big, legal, heavy-hitting documents. And as the mayor said, we are going to be bringing the Harrisburg City Archives into the state archives and make it hopefully much more accessible for people so that we can tell the story of this community even better. So, caring for records like that for hundreds and hundreds of years, everything from parchment, like the 1681 document, to the electronic records of the last governor. We care for digital records as well. It requires a very special building to do that sort of thing. And we don't know what that building's going to look like yet. We're not far enough along in the planning, but we do know certain things about the building, and I'll tell you what we do know at this point. Firstly, we know that we're going to build it to national standards and best practices, because we want the finest state archives in the country, and we don't want to skimp on that. And what that means is, and some people here will throw a brick at me when I say this, but it's not going to be a tall building. The best practices say you can't have a really tall archives. In the 70s, the Personnel Center, Records Center in St. Louis, the Army Personnel Records Center, burned to the ground and destroyed millions of veterans' records. And after that, it became best practice not to build tall buildings because they're like chimneys and they run the paper. We're standing here. The fire chief could come up and tell us about that as well. So that's one thing we know about it. We know it will be dry because we have located above the floodplain, and obviously that's a huge issue with us to make sure that it's a dry building. It will be two things that are sort of contradictory. It will be both welcoming and secure. When you look at our current building, you see secure, but some people don't see welcoming when they see it, all right? And we want it to be both. It has to be secure. There will be parts of this building that don't have windows because we don't want windows into the storage areas where the light could damage the records and such. But we want a part of the building, a big part of the building, to be welcoming to the public. So as you walk by, it's a place you want to go in, and we want you to come in. When the building that we now have was built, research was really limited often to PhDs and scholars and that sort of thing, and we don't think that way much anymore. We want you all to come, search your family history, search your community, and come in. So we know it's going to be welcoming, and we know it's going to be designed to last for many, many, many years, decades and decades. So we want to be good neighbors, and I like to think of us as being high quality but low impact neighbors. It's sort of like a library in your community. We're going to bring people in, but we're not going to have tens of thousands of people coming every week and creating traffic jams and things like that. We have several thousand people, a few thousand people who come every year, and it will be a steady flow of traffic, but not a big traffic impact. We don't have a lot of trucks coming through the neighborhood. Once we've moved in, we get a truck maybe once a quarter at the most. We just don't have big trucks coming to our building, so it's not going to be that kind of impact either once the move is over. So we think that will be very low impact. We will have an exhibit space, we hope, where people can come and see exhibits about our documents. We have our research room, which is a lot like a library where people come in and conduct research, and you can come in and conduct research. We'll probably have a small space for conferences and workshops and things, but again, we have a conference of maybe 100 people. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of people at one time. So it should be very low impact, but I think very high quality, and a space we hope that you will want to come and visit and be part of. So everything we do is not about the records. In fact, nothing we do is about the records. It's about the people who use the records. And so everything we do in this building will be aimed at protecting the records, but making them accessible to people, protecting them legally, preserving their treasures. So we are really looking forward to being a part of this neighborhood, and I can't wait till it's over and we're there. Believe me, I want to be here, and so we're excited by this. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Julian from DGS, and he will talk about the property more than I can.
That's right.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, David. I am Julian Godian. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Property and Asset Management at Department of General Services. And our agency is responsible for acquiring the site, building the building, and then maintaining the building for the Museum and Historical Commission. So we do everything behind the scenes to make sure that they're successful. We started this process back in July of 2015, where we did a public solicitation within the city of Harrisburg for a site. And we came up with only one positive bid response that fit the requirements that was put forth by PHMC outside of the floodplain, at least 2 acres. And it was this site, as you can see on the placards here, to my right, the site that was selected. So we're very excited about that site. It has a lot of operational efficiencies. It's close to the Capitol complex, our maintenance management team, our grounds team, our facilities team, and even Capitol Police for security during the off hours. So it's a 3-acre site. We're going to be investing approximately $24 million in this building. The building will take 3 years to construct, so 1 year for the design and then 2 years for the construction. So we're looking at a 3-year process beginning of fall of this year. So with that, I'm going to keep my comments short because the opportunity here is for you all to ask questions, and we have the whole team here prepared to answer your questions. So why don't we open it up for questions this evening?
Are we going to pass the microphone, I think? I'm happy that I will MC the questions. But raise your hand if you have a question and we'll get the experts up.
Thank you. I assume that since you're not going to be going up, but you're going to go out, you'll have a fairly substantial footprint on the land. And stormwater management is a really big deal in Harrisburg these days. And I was just hoping that when you're doing the plans, that you will take stormwater management into consideration in the plans. I don't think a green roof would be very suitable for an archives, but there are a lot of other things I think that can be done to help manage the stormwater coming off that building. So thank you.
Julian, I guess we can say that we are talking about a multi-story building. This is something which is very important to the city. We didn't want just a single-story long strip of the building. We want something that's going to contribute to the streetscape, that's going to spur additional development, but at the same time, we don't want a tall tower or chimney, as the current building has been described. Would you like somebody to address the stormwater management issue? Do you have
Liz, would you like to?
Yes, Liz, come on. Yes. Okay. Because I know that's something that DGS is obviously very conscious of.
Yep. I'm Liz O'Reilly. I'm happy to answer your question. I work for DGS. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Public Works. So it's on us to design and build this. We always take stormwater very seriously. And we are talking and we'll discuss LEED qualifications also in this building. So we're very environmentally sensitive, and we will anticipate not only stormwater but sewer and the way the building looks and the way it fits into the neighborhood. The architect, I will say, is Vitetta. Vitetta is, we've used Vitetta a lot. They're the best in the business, and we went through an extensive interview process to make sure that we got the right team. So we're really confident we have the right team. Vitetta, for those of you that are familiar with Harrisburg, did the Judicial Center downtown. So that's the kind of quality work that it's very pleasing on the eyes. So we're very confident we have the right team. And I will just say, this is the first of what we anticipate will be several public meetings. Because during the design stage, as we can't stand here and tell you a lot right now, but as we develop it, we're happy to come back and present the latest sketches and what it looks like and continue to involve the public.
Yes, we are really at the earliest stages. Okay, coming back here.
I have a question. Are you going to involve Gotham County archives? You're involved with the city and the state of Gotham County?
Oh, David, that's...
We have had discussions with Dauphin County on that. We do work with a lot of municipalities and such, and so if there's an opportunity, we would discussed that with them, but we haven't discussed it yet. Harrisburg got to us first.
And I'll add, I think the city of Harrisburg had a very special need, and we were upfront about that need early on in the selection process. We have an extraordinary collection of historical records with the city of Harrisburg, and no means of really caring for those properly, no means of having an archivist on staff or really doing anything other than some of the volunteer scanning, which we've done with Jump Street and other things. So this is very, very exciting for us. And I think it is also key that since the archives is going to be here in the Capitol, you should also be able to see those founding documents related to Harrisburg at the same time you visit the archives. So it was a special request. Yes, follow up?
Well, but it's also in Dauphin County, and that's why I asked the question.
Okay.
Yes, sure.
There's a formal relationship that municipalities can have with state archives that's written into the history code. And so we were going through that formal process and having an MOU and that sort of thing. And I was only saying no one from Dauphin County has approached us to say, would you enter into that sort of agreement with us at this point? So we're working with Harrisburg, as we have with other places. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
All right, who else has a question? Please raise your hand. Sir.
I was wondering about what plans there are for parking.
That is an excellent question, and let's give Julian, will you go to the map, please?
Excellent question. If you all have not come up to see, this is a map of the site of the proposed archive. It is 3 acres approximately, and you'll see it is between 6th and 7th Street.
6th Street.
So it outlines clearly the boundaries, so I invite you all to come up and look at the map, but there will be parking, on-site parking for those visiting the archive.
And right now, I think the parking is planned for...
How many spaces? We haven't designed the building yet, so we don't know how many spaces yet, but there'll be an appropriate number of spaces, I'm assuming, to code.
I think the building will predominantly stretch from 6th to 7th, this area here, and that leaves area over here for parking.
Correct. Right now, our initial vision of the building is it will be forward-facing to 6th Street, and the loading area will be in the 7th Street side.
It's kind of a follow-up with that. I mean, obviously it's very preliminary in your designs. Access, for the parking and other things would primarily be 7th Street, I think, as far as, getting in and out of buildings. And also with the potential federal courthouse, I guess that, now you're getting into a lot of development in one particular area. Whether there's, obviously it's federal and it's a state, but, the access questions and parking all kind of interrelated.
I'll take a stab at answering some of that, which is that actually I think the parking would be accessed from 6th Street. The lot is sort of L-shaped, so it goes between 6th and 7th where the building footprint will be, but it's really, the other part of the L is really off of 6th Street. And that's where most likely the parking would be. And with regard to the federal courthouse, this project will be finished before the federal courthouse is. And hopefully this project will show the GSA and the federal government the possibilities of what can be done. So you're looking at a very tight schedule here. We're looking at a design phase finished here within a year, and then shovels in the ground in a 2-year building project. That's very, very quick. I know David is nervous about all the work that will have to be done just to prepare for that move. But we will build this project first, and then GSA will build theirs, hopefully, as a secondary project that will build on what we've done. Okay? Yep, and if you have other questions about transportation, we have our city engineer here, we've got other people, we've got all the experts in the room, and we'll get to them. So, next question, coming over here.
I think I'm correct in that you have some of the archival materials are stored off-site because of space and other considerations. Will the new building be able to accommodate all that? That would be a large increase in that.
So currently we do not have any records from the archive stored off-site. All the records are in the building. Now we do run also the State Record Center. My office manages the State Record Center, which is a different location, and that may be what you're thinking of there. But none of the archives records are in there. We are building this for a capacity that will grow for many, many years to come. And there are two reasons for that. One is we will build the entire facility with compact mobile shelving, which they could not do in the 50s and 60s. And so in the same footprint, we can put many, many more records than we can put in a building today, or that was built in the 60s. The other is that we are receiving more and more records digitally. And so over time, the paper will continue to fall. We will still be getting paper, but the volume is going to go down. And so we feel like this should be adequate for many, many years.
Okay, please raise your hand. Come around.
This is another example of the state taking land with the potential for taxes that would be abated because the state is taking it over. I know that there's a great deal of concern about this. Is there any provisions that you would propose within the entire contract that would compensate the city, as does the state for the fire services that the city provides for the state?
I think that's where the MOU with the City Archives comes in, and that's something that we've pushed from the beginning. We see that as a liability right now. It's worth at least $100,000 a year in terms of that's what it would cost if we were to adequately maintain our records and make them accessible to the public. So that's part of the answer. The second thing is that I think it's important to note, when we did do a survey, the entire tract of that land contributes less than $3,000 a year in taxes to the city of Harrisburg, which shows you a little something about the assessed value. And it's also not been developed for many years. We see a lot of undeveloped land here. The hope is that by building this archives project here, we will stimulate the additional type of ripple effect development across the street, for instance, and all the way down this corridor that will lead to increased tax revenue values for the city. Another important thing to keep in mind is not only to view it in terms of simply property taxes. The local services tax and the earned income tax alone, the local services tax alone paid by the employees that will now not be moving out of the city but will be staying into the city exceeds the revenue right now that even comes in with property taxes. So we were very eager not to see those jobs leave the city, and we're also very eager to see the type of construction jobs and other jobs that are going to come with such a multi-million-dollar project. But it is a good thing to discuss and to constantly consider. And I can say DGS has been a very, very good partner with the city in this. That will include also in terms of the sanitation contract for the building and other ways the building will contribute to the city services, neighborhood services fund.
My question is, what is the intended use for the original space after the move, and will the PHMC still be managing that space?
Excellent question. Coming around.
I'll try that one. We're planning to do a feasibility study on the current archives building. And what we're going to look at is what will it cost to rehab that building, to use it for storage for our museum. It's part of the complex now that is attached to the museum. And our museum, like the archives, is running out of storage space, particularly in terms of its archaeological storage, which is a collection that keeps growing. The nice thought about all this is that the boxes in which archaeological materials are stored are the very same size and shape as the boxes that are presently stored in the archive building. So we're hoping that once David moves out, we'll have a year or two to rehab the building, put in some fire suppression and some things that it needs, and then we'll start moving the archaeology collections in there.
What are the benefits for the residents around the building?
The question was, what are the benefits for the residents around the building? Now, I can address that, but should we all talk about it? One thing I would say is that what we'd like to see is that for many, many years we have had a real dearth of development in that area. And if we come in with a really well done, well funded economic development project like this, you will see a benefit to both a spur of future development, but also an increase in property values throughout the sort of contiguous areas and the contiguous neighborhoods. So that's a real benefit. There's a cultural and a historical benefit, which I think is truly important. Let's talk about genealogy. I think it's really important that people understand where they came from, more about their family's histories, how their family's histories are sort of interwoven with the history of the city. We're in a very historically rich section of the city, whether it's the Camp Curtin district that we are near, and the historic Midtown district that we're sort of straddling between. So those records and that accessibility and that ability to tell the story, I think, is important. They're talking about having a welcome, opening, accessible building, much like a library. So you're going to have a safe space for study and studious research. I think there are a lot of opportunities for partnerships with the Harrisburg School District and for others in terms of research. We already have some of those partnerships in place with the city archives, whether it's learning how to digitize materials or conduct basic research. So I think there's a great educational benefit as well. And that's just sort of right off the bat. I would say that you'd hopefully see a ripple effect that would also bring additional amenities to the neighborhood. Although we have great places to eat and discuss all the activity that's happening in the area, I think there could be more of that. And slowly but surely, you're going to see the development of a corridor here, a key corridor, the 6th and 7th Street corridor area of the city, which hasn't seen a lot of change over the past decades, but hopefully we'll start to see it in the future. So that's my short answer. Other comments? Yep, okay. I think,
Back in 2015, when we were deciding on the site for the archive, the mayor actually was instrumental in keeping the archive in the city and the resources that accompany it, whether it's the maintenance team, Capitol Police, all of that, because we were actually looking outside of the city limits as well for this archive and this investment. So I just wanted that to be recognized as well. And then, if you look at the Capitol complex, I think we're pretty good neighbors as far as the Capitol campus, especially this time of year, and all the things that we bring to it as far as the grounds, Capitol Police, snow removal. They're pretty well-maintained facilities and good, quiet neighbors. As it was said earlier, this is going to be akin to having a library in your neighborhood. So,
yeah, the Harrisburg Police Department is excited about having the Capitol Police sort of extending its footprint up into this neighborhood. I think that really shouldn't be underestimated. That's a very positive collaboration that we currently have with them. And will mean increased patrols and just a larger footprint for the Capitol Police than it currently has, which I think is going to be very good. Did you want? No? Okay, very good. Next question. Well, let me get everybody who's not asked a question first, and then we'll go back for secondary questions. Yep.
I'm not sure who the director's to, but can you comment, maybe you, Mayor, will our archives be digitized so that, like Jump Street has been doing, or will it just be mainly moving them on site and preserving them? Do you know any more what the plans are for our archives?
So, Jeb, are you willing to address the jumps? Could you talk about the Jump Street scanning project and what that's meant in terms of digitizing some of the city archives? The reason I say that is because we have had a partnership with a number of students to digitize a lot of our records already, but they've really just addressed the tip of the iceberg. Some of the more important photographs, some of the early atlases, that's about it. We would plan to continue that over the course of the next 3 years as part of the preparation process that would come into before the move. But I think just like with the state archives, the amount of paper and the amount of effort you have to go into digitizing everything is really a very long-term project, but it's something that will continue. And maybe just mention the website and what people would find for the city archives now if they go online.
Yes, we spent 2 years with Jump Street and taking materials out of the city archives for them to have the experience of scanning. These were high school students, but we of course worked with them on that. There's a tremendous amount that's already online, and you want to go to harrisburgcityarchives.org. And these are materials that ultimately will be transferred to the new archive building, which are currently in storage by the city. And we're looking at atlases, postcards, photography, birth and death records, and other materials that are very important. Now, there's not a lot because it's a tremendous amount to scan. I think we did scan one city directory of 600 pages, and that took some time. But we wanted to give a sample of what's out there, and feel free to check out that website.
Jeff has done a great job with getting those things scanned and keeping the archives going, and I appreciate that very much. I want to just mention, the State Archives has right now about 13.5 million documents online. Now we do have 250 million documents, so it'll be a little longer before we get them all out there. But we do an awful lot of work through partnerships, and we partner, for instance, with Ancestry.com. They have a person right now who's working full-time in our building at no expense to the taxpayers to scan our records and get them out online. And yes, they go into Ancestry, but if you come in through the State Archives website, you get free access to them because there are records. So what we look for are partnerships. And I've already had a college professor come to me and say, my students would love to scan more Harrisburg records, but we have trouble getting access to them because of the hours and everything else. And so the mayor and I were talking the other day, this will be a great opportunity because we will be able to provide that access. We'll get the students in, let them do the scanning, and we'll work with them. So I think that'll be a great benefit.
Yeah, I will just say we've had researchers calling sort of every week since I've been mayor to want to find out something about Harrisburg's history or access the city archives, and we haven't been able to answer their questions or provide them with that. And we're really excited about that. And I think you'll see partnerships with places like Penn State, Harrisburg, other surrounding departments, lots of great educational partnerships around the archives. So there is demand, and that is being addressed. Okay, additional questions? I'm coming.
Good evening. My name is James White. I'm a member and representative of the Pennsylvania Diversified Coalition. We endeavor to level the economic playing field. My question to DGS is, what plan of inclusion or policy do you already have in effect to include local MBs and WBs in this area to prosper for some of this economic inclusion?
Very important question, and we're going to hand it over to Liz.
Hello again, how are you doing? Good? Perfect. Okay, so it's way too early to commit to anything. And the lawyers would kill me to even say what I'm going to say, but that's okay. When we procure construction contracts, we have a multitude of ways to do it. The unique nature of this project would lend itself, instead of sealed low bids, so low bid takes it, low number takes it, it would lend itself, although I'm not committing to, a proposal process where the proposers, the interested bidders, would have to submit a proposal consisting of 3 separate sections. One is cost, one is their technical qualifications, because we don't want to dwell on it, but there's very unique construction aspects of this. The roof can't leak. I mean, we have to have HVAC that doesn't, all that good stuff. So we would ask them their qualifications of how they've done it in the past. So the prime contractors would have to give us all that. And the third part of the proposal would be their what I would call the diversity and inclusion plan. So they that is evolving, but it essentially is they have to tell us either at a minimum the percentages of the construction contract that they will pay directly to diverse suppliers and subcontractors. And there's also the ability to, when we do a proposal process, we have a pre-proposal process that's also a marketing opportunity for interested subcontractors and suppliers to come in and say, hey, who are the prime contractors, and guess what, here's the interested subs and suppliers who want to talk to you about being on your team. So there's significant participation every time we do a proposal award. So that is the tentative plan at this point. As the design progresses, we can get into more detail on that.
So when in the process would that become formalized? We'll be back before the public with another meeting before that time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask. Sure.
I can give you my business card. I'm also from the Department of General Services and put you in touch with the small and disadvantaged director, Deshaun Lewis. So I'll give you my business card and she can give you in great detail how to participate and be ready for this opportunity.
Let me just do a little more. We do that all the time. So anybody that that is interested in our diverse website, please let me know or let Julian know, and we'll look you up. You can search it. You can become part of it. We have a self-certification process where you can become a small diverse business opportunity. So please, if you're thinking about that, let us know, and we'll help you along the way. We're happy to do it, and Deshaun's really, really good at it.
Okay, additional questions? Anywhere in the audience? Oh, okay, so we're going to secondary questions now. That's fair.
Thank you. I know the city has a special project going on for the 6th, 7th Street, and Division Street development. How does this mesh with the 6th and 7th Street developments and all?
Great.
Part of the same plan?
I would like to bring up Wayne Martin, who's the city engineer, and Jeffrey Knight, who is the city planning director. Is Jeffrey? Yeah, there he is. And Jeffrey, maybe you could talk about how this meshes with the comprehensive plan, and Wayne, maybe you could talk about how this works with our current study that we're undergoing, okay? So Jeffrey Knight first.
Well, the way that the site will work with the 6th, 7th Division Street plans and 2nd Street corridor as well, I would say those are separate processes, so it's not directly related, but certainly whatever gets developed there will have to consider what plans have already been done, such as the widening that's happened from First Street to Clay Street on 7th, as well as what might happen in the future, including, and this is kind of getting into the comprehensive plan part, possibly bike lanes up and down 6th Street, turning it into a more kind of neighborhood-focused corridor going north-south, as opposed to 7th Street, which is more of a kind of commuting corridor connecting over to the Cameron Street corridor. So especially if 2nd Street gets converted 2 ways, and then traffic will be diverted out that way. So the way this is going to fit into the comprehensive plan is that hopefully, as the mayor said earlier, it will help spur development. I mean, right now, we're kind of projecting there to be higher density development in the 6th, 7th Street corridor there, but we really don't know what kind that'll be. What the market will look like, whether we'll be able to spur that kind of development. A project like this will start bringing people into that corridor. That will start kind of demanding secondary services, as the mayor said, surrounding it, which will hopefully then start driving more development along there. So this is right in keeping with the development and the incentivizing of higher density development along that corridor.
So specifically, the City of Harrisburg was awarded a Tri-County Regional Planning Grant to preliminary engineering of the 6th, 7th Street corridors between Forester Street and Division Street, and also the Division Street corridor to Front Street, which we utilized to say what would we need to do to keep the neighborhood character of these streets, but also to actually fulfill the 7th Street, which is completely underutilized corridor with I think 20% capacity. But what would these corridors look like if 2nd Street was converted 2-way? What kind of improvements would the neighborhood like to see? What kind of improvements would be necessary from a traffic standpoint? And so that study is ongoing. We had one public meeting. We have another one not tentatively scheduled for May. I don't have the date yet. I'm still working with the consultants on that. But the chief offered this as a venue, so I think it'll be hosted here, 3rd, 4th week in May. So more to follow on the exact date and time of that meeting, but I invite everyone to attend it. And obviously, with the news of this and the latest news of the federal building sort of gaining some momentum, we will incorporate those plans as well as the comprehensive plan, of course, in that preliminary engineering.
Good. And we should just say that DGS has been very good about working in the initial early stages with engineering and planning to make sure that we have a project here which really does integrate with what the city wants to see and has spoken in terms of what its priorities are with the comprehensive plan. So, additional questions? Yep.
My question is for Jim, actually. I know that the PHMC has multiple sites around the state of Pennsylvania that it staffs, and I was wondering, will you be creating new jobs for this new facility that's larger, or will you be moving PHMC staff into the space from your former staff or other sites?
I got up fast because I knew David would say he needs a lot more staff. The answer to that is that we're going to try to design an efficient building, but we are going to take on new responsibilities there in the digital side. So my expectation is that we'll design a building for staff growth as our mission broadens. But I wouldn't think at the outset there'll be a big jump in the staff that's here. And yes, we hope that most of the staff that are with us now will move up here when the time comes.
The current staffing size was 20? About 30. Okay, so at least we're preserving 30 jobs that might otherwise have left the city, and then we're creating room for growth, which would be great. So, any final questions or thoughts? If not, then I would like to thank DGS, the PHMC, the State Archives, all for coming out to this, and you, of course, for coming out tonight. This will be the first of multiple meetings on it, and I guess our next meeting will be once the design phase is really kicked in and we have some preliminary designs to share, and we will make sure that we publicize that meeting and have it somewhere in the neighborhood as well for you, and we'll keep you posted all along the way for this project. Thank you again for coming out, and if you have additional questions and want to linger, please ask any of the state or city representatives that are here one-on-one. Good night.